Hello and welcome to Creature Club. It's a podcast all about the monsters of Dungeons and Dragons. I am Daniel White, I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by your two other hosts, Tim.
Hello.
And Mikey.
How's it going?
You guys don't get surnames and I do. That wasn't deliberate, but it happened.
Yeah.
In this show, we talk all about the monsters from Dungeons and Dragons. We talk about how they work, what they do, what we like about them, maybe sometimes what we don't like about them. Ooh. Sometimes we might give out to the people who make them, but always in the spirit of good fun. Because ultimately that's what we're here for. We're here to have fun, and we are going to continue talking about the elementals this episode, which we started last episode. I hope you listened to that, because if you haven't done your homework, you'll probably be confused, just like in real life. And we're going to finish the elementals. There's two more elementals to do, which I think were both hinted at and actually just said outright. In the previous episode, this episode we are going to cover the fire and water elementals. Did you boys notice that we did the two what's like contrasting elements, so like air and earth, and now fire and water?
Yeah. We didn't mean to do it that way, but it's it's a very nice little theme.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, and we did it alphabetically, so it's perfect in multiple different ways.
Wow. I believe it was alphabetical
intentionally.
Intentionally. And I think the niceness is a secondary consequence of that.
I mean, my instinct would have been to say wind elemental, not air elemental, because earth, fire, water, and wind makes sense to me.
But they all get a letter. They all get a different letter.
That's true. That is
W
true
elemental.
Yeah, wind and water would have the same letter.
That would ruin the entire game. It would be completely unplayable.
It ruined my game. I think.
It ruined my day.
Yeah, it ruined my month.
I wouldn't be able to sleep for a week.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Tim, you have... What time's it now? 3 minutes? Great. All right, that's enough banter.
All right, great. That's enough bullshit.
That's enough of the that's enough shite.
Preamble.
Tim,
you said you had something on one of these guys, right?
I do. There's a small amount about the fire elementals in Paracelsus's a book on nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, and salamanders and other spirits from the year.
I remember that
from the 16th century. Yeah. And so it basically just says that, I mean, I forgot to mention this in the previous episode, Paracelsus's elementals are humanoid. They are people. Oh. And that is they are most personified in the water elementals. But we'll get to those in a second, because there's more to say about them. The fire elementals are the salamanders, which is just kind of used world round as like a creature that basically endures fire or lives in fire or feeds off fire. Yeah. It's also used in some heraldry, but most of the time, unless it was specifically dictated by the person whose like flag it was mostly seen just as a dragon. But there's like a French king who insisted it wasn't a dragon, that it was a salamander, and you're just like, all right, buddy, you're a king. Well, sure, it's a salamander.
I guess it's a salamander now.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yes, my lord.
Yes, my lord.
It's like in Breath of the Wild, one of the divine beasts of the fire area. I forgot the name, but it's a salamander. It's a big salamander that climbs around the mountain. So
cool.
Great.
Yeah, like they're very broadly used as something to just like exist in fire. Salamanders, because I think it was Pliny I saw in my research who first mentioned that it was like one of the things that Pliny pointed out, that there was a difference between salamanders and lizards, because I think salamanders are actually amphibious while lizards are typically terrestrial. So that's kind of funky.
I would definitely listen to Pliny. He's a very good guitarist.
He's a very good guitarist.
Whoever gets
Pliny's the guitarist, Pliny the Elder. Sorry. Yeah.
Who knows?
It's alright, spell the same.
Yeah, they're the same guy, you know.
I don't think Pliny the Elder is around to complain anymore. So
no, not likely, unless he found his way to immortality. But that was one of the distinctions that he found. But he also wrote that they exist in fire, and then I think it was Aristotle later on that said that if that was true, it should be easily demonstrable, and he didn't say what he did to try to demonstrate it, but he was like, it is not demonstrable. Let's throw some salamanders into the fire.
There is, I think I read somewhere that the origin of the salamander was that there are like these kinds of tree lizards that like hibernate in wood, and basically people would like use them to start fires, and then the fire would wake up, the heat from the flames would wake the lizards, and then they'd scatter. So they were small enough that they didn't. It wasn't easy to spot them beforehand. But obviously, if you were looking at a fire and like 7 lizards just run out of the flames, you'll notice that.
You're like, whoa, the fire made those lizards, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes sense from the perspective of like, if you're like, every time we light a fire with this kind of wood, lizards come out. Therefore, this kind of wood makes fire lizards. And it's like, yeah, you're like 90% of the way there.
Yeah, you just about got it, you know?
Like, yeah. It's like, if you got it, like, yeah.
Maybe chop your wood a little better.
Yeah. Or, you know, or just pick the wood off the ground and don't go for the trees at all. 'Cause, yeah.
Like, maybe there's some animals living there
Give it
already.
a second. So, yeah, that's the salamander. There's not a... I mean, they're a fun, interesting idea for sure, even throughout history. But there wasn't a huge amount of, like, specific references to any that I could find.
Also, we'll get to the proper salamander later, so
yes, indeed,
keep that in your butt pocket.
And then there is the water elemental, which is a nymph, which is what we have referenced many times in the past. But there is also the undine, which is a reference that I had never made the connection for. One of the characters in Undertale is named Undine, and they are this fish lady, this fish warrior. And I was like, that's something I did not know, and now I do. But water elementals are basically just any creature that is of freshwater or salt water. And since Paracelsus...
Why would it list both? What other kinds of water are there?
Hard water.
Hard water, soft water.
Back in the day,
Nice.
back in the day, they actually distinguished between salt water of the sea, fresh water of the rivers and lakes, and then the Mediterranean water. Like, supposedly it was different because there was so much life in it.
Quick aside, do you guys remember in school when they're in science class when they first teach you about hard water, and they're like, so what is hard water? And then you'd have one guy going like, it's ice, right? Like, and the teacher's like, it's ice. I knew you'd say that.
You fool. You buffoon. You fall for my trap.
You fall for my trap. It's not ice.
This was a shadow game. Yeah, and so basically, for all the different areas that you found them, there were a whole bunch of different ones. You had Nereides, which were the 50 daughters of Nereus and Doris, who were more Greek gods. One of them's the son of Gaia, the other's a daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. And then there are Naiads, which are the ones that I think I referenced most frequently. And then there are also mermaids, Potamides or Potamides, and Limnads, which are all various depictions of different water creatures and elementals that they were either protectors of or just denizens of various bodies of water that people came up with some mythology about. I presume it's just they saw some women swimming and were like, oh my god, wow, that's a mermaid.
Women can't be in the water. That must be a magic animal.
Women explode if they touch water, like potassium.
Potassium, I was just thinking.
And one of the coolest things that I found specifically about the Undine, because I hadn't read about that, was that there is a congenital condition that you can be born with called congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, which is also known as Undine's curse. Because like I mentioned in the last episode, when you marry a sylph, when you marry an elemental, they gain a soul. And with the Undine specifically, there was a story of one that married their husband, gained a soul, but then their husband was unfaithful to them. So the Undine cursed them with, if they fall asleep, they will stop breathing. And Undine's curse in the real world, or what people refer to as Undine's curse, is when the autonomic nervous system doesn't make you breathe. You have to consciously breathe at all times, basically. Like, if you forget to breathe, you stop breathing. Which not a lot of people live very long with it. But like, it was very interesting to see this reference to a classical literature thing in a medical field.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting old situation.
Gosh,
yeah,
the human body is such a complex series of systems. Like,
it so
any
is.
part of it can go wrong, and it's so fucking horrible when it does.
It was like, oh, we've made most of the human, and we forgot the automatic stuff. Apparently, your heartbeats.
Forgot autopilot.
No, like the heartbeats, but it's just like your breathing that doesn't work, which is strange.
Oh, I see.
Because the breathing is kind of in between autonomic and whatever the other word for it is, kind of manual. You can choose to breathe, or you can, whereas your heart, it just keeps beating. Although there are people that can control their heartbeat somewhat with breathing techniques and meditation.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I wonder, is that to do with where in the body it's like directed from? Like, is breathing directed from the brain or the spine? Because I'd imagine maybe it's directed from the brain, and that's why you can engage with it manually, or or kind of allow it to happen automatically.
And just kind of do its own thing. But yeah, I'm not sure. The human
body has like 3 brains, and they always do different things.
And that was a little bit of real world history regarding water.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I always feel like I drop some weird bullshit, and Tim is always actually teaching the world.
Yeah,
it's nice to know that, like, you know, it's good to know that, like,
a little bit of balance.
Tim keeps us like in between like the ballet and the medical references. Tim's kind of keeping us our head above water as far as, you know, we're not drowning in filth yet.
Yeah.
If it was me and Mikey, we'd just be a pair of degenerates. Like,
that's true. Yeah. Have you ever listened to a me and Dan podcast? It's like we don't get to any point really. We just shout at each other.
Well, that's very kind.
We just constantly referenced like stupid anime shit or something.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
What's going on here at all?
Well, that's actually great, Tim. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
It was great. I agree.
Yeah. But since you already spoke at length about the elementals in previous editions, do you have any other cool D&D knowledge?
There isn't much on them, unfortunately, other than that. As what I said before, the main thing I will mention very briefly is that, and this will probably come up later as well, is that the rule set is almost identical to what you see in 5th edition, the 3rd edition and 5th edition rule set. Mm-hmm. And again, they have the different sizes, which is something that I think would be nice. I actually really like the sizes. I think they're like a nice idea that you know, the notion that a sort of a caster of different strength could summon elementals of different sizes.
And I really like the fusions as well. They were cool.
I think it's definitely worth acknowledging that the fusions are cool. But I think actually we should talk about them once we cover both of these guys in 5th edition.
So we jump straight into the old meat and potatoes.
I think so, yeah. Oh, well, I'm not mean
wait,
there's
little sections.
Of course.
Absolutely.
My mistake.
There's 2 more. I've read through the intro of elementals in the last episode.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go straight into what it says about fire elementals and water elementals. So, fire elemental. A faint humanoid shape threads through the core of this wild, moving flame. A fire elemental is a force of capricious devastation. Wherever it moves, it sets its surroundings ablaze, turning the world to ash, smoke, and cinders. Water can halt its destructive progress, causing the fire elemental to shrink back, hissing and smoking in pain and rage. Hissing and smoking,
God.
Just like
Same.
When you are working a really long shift in a restaurant and you're outside the back and someone goes up to you and said you have to go back in and you're just hissing and smoking
in pain and
your
rage.
supervisor.
Hashtag relatable.
Hashtag relatable, I guess. So yeah, the water thing is actually kind of interesting because we'll get to it, but that is a thing where water is bad for it because water would be bad for fire. But we'll get to that when we get to the stat block. But the next is the water elemental. A water elemental is a cresting wave that rolls across the ground, becoming nearly invisible as it courses through a larger body of water. It engulfs creatures that stand against it, filling their mouths and lungs as easy as it smothers flames. That's something interesting and quite like I never really thought about is what if a water elemental was just in water? Like for some reason it's so simple, but I never really think about just a water elemental just going through water, you know? Just it get
like you think of the earth elemental kind of doing its earth stride thing, but I've never considered the water elemental. Like I could imagine now having considered it for half a second. I can imagine like the eyes in the water, like you see its little face, like 2 eyes and a mouth in the water.
But it's like nearly invisible, so like it's you have to really look for like that. So if you're in like a lake or something, and you're just like, you know, fishing, then like the water just comes out and grabs you, and like what, and then you're just taken underneath the water. But it's cool. Like maybe if you have like, go ahead.
Have a story to that effect, but I will save it for part 3 of this podcast.
Ooh. Save it for later, Dan. Save it for later.
Do it. Stick around if you want to hear dads. For dad's anecdote.
Dad, sit down.
Yes. No. It's like
I was the first one to call John Dad.
Yes. You heard it here.
Episode 75. It finally happened.
It's like calling your
gates have opened.
Oh, it's like calling the teacher mum.
Yeah.
Oh, you did it. Oh, Tim.
Whoops. You stick around to the end of the episode if you want to hear Dan's anecdote. Or your dad's. You can bring him in.
My dad. I think he's busy, but I'll see if he's got a moment.
Yeah. I will call my dad real quick.
Do you have anything to say about Water Elemental's dad?
What?
Go back to school, son.
He's rewatching The Sopranos now, so I think
when is he not?
Be mad. Yeah, when is he not doing that? When is the dad not watching The Sopranos again?
Everyone's dad, while they are not in sight, is always rewatching The Sopranos.
Yeah. Right, cool. Absolutely. Stick around for that one. So, will we jump into the meat and potatoes, guys, before we
I think so.
lose our minds? All right, let's do it, guys.
Absolutely. Let's do that. I just want to take a moment to mention. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but I absolutely love the meme of like, "What are you watching, Dad?" It's just on, and then just anything.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely in love with it. It's so funny. It's such a real experience of walking in on your dad, just like, you know, like, what are you doing? It's like I'm just watching the telly. Like, I don't care what's on the telly. It's just that I'm here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just relaxing after a day's work and just like, I don't know, the TV's on. I don't care much, you know.
It's great.
It's just
I don't care what's on the TV.
Yeah.
Great times. First up, we have the Fire Elemental. Large elemental neutral, so same as the other 2 elementals covered in the previous episode. Armor class 13, that gives it the lowest armor class out of the elementals so far. Hit points 102. Speed 50 feet. That's interesting. Strength 10, so strong as a normal person. Dexterity 17, Constitution 16, Intelligence 6, Wisdom 10, and Charisma 7. The fire elemental is more charismatic than air and earth. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what the rules are behind it.
Find that. No, fire is always like. Have you ever just looked at a fire?
Fire's hot.
But I think if you were gonna indulge, well, let's get to that after the end of the stat block. I think that's actually a good point.
Yeah, okay.
Damage resistance is bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magic attacks. That's fine. That's nothing. Damage immunities: fire, unsurprisingly, and poison, also unsurprisingly. Condition immunities: exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, and unconscious. So, like the air elemental, you can't grab it. You probably don't want to, and also you can't knock it out because it's like a living flame. Senses dark vision 60 feet, so no cool tremor sense or anything like that, or like heat sense, heat vision perhaps, infrared or something to that effect, but we can get to that stuff later. Passive perception 10, again, just not trained, it's got 10 wisdom. Language is Ignan, which is the language of fire people, and it's a challenge 5 monster, so it's worth 1,800 experience points, same as I think all the elementals.
What are you guys going to do with your 1,800 experience points?
Well, you know, I would really.
That's like my friend Daniel is just saying, don't.
Please. I beg you.
Don't go where I can't follow. It has 3 abilities. It's got the most abilities out of every elemental.
Yeah.
Fire form. The elemental can squeeze through a space as narrow as 1 inch. Oh, sorry. It can move through a space of 1 inch without squeezing. Obviously, we've covered this before. If it's squeezed, perhaps it could go even smaller. A creature that touches the elemental or hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet of it takes 5, normally, or 1d10 if you feel like rolling, fire damage. In addition, the elemental can enter a hostile creature's space and stop there. Just stop and just end its turn.
Collaborate.
And not do anything else.
And listen.
The first time it enters a creature's space on a turn, that creature takes 5, same 1d10, fire damage and catches fire.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
I shouldn't laugh at that, but it's just funny because, like, you know, the way D&D works is like sometimes fire attacks just don't set you on fire, and sometimes they just do, and it's like it's never clear like what the rule is. It's like, oh Jesus, this time I'm on fire.
And of course, like PCs would be like, all right, I'm on fire. What do I do now? Like, how do I get rid of this?
Stop, drop, and roll.
It's like it's great, yeah. Like PCs don't feel anything; they're just like, I'm on fire. This is a status debuff. How do I deal with it? Rather than be like, oh my god. Until someone takes an action to douse the fire, the creature takes 1d10 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. It's worth mentioning at this point, just because it's come up a few times. I don't know if you fellas are aware of this, but d10s are what the game uses for elemental effects. That's a bad term. Environmental effects. So, like, if a rock falls on you, and it's like, how much damage did a rock do? It's you should use a sliding scale of d10s. Same is true for fire. There's a little table somewhere in the DMG. God help me, I couldn't find it if I needed to. My life was dependent on it. But it's also in the DM screen, and it says stuff like, hey, if someone knocked over one of those big stone things full of coals at somebody, how much damage would that deal? That kind of thing. Yeah. And it says, and it always kind of breaks it down in a number of d10s.
Sorry, I have something like that on my DM's screen, and the highest one, it's like example of like being tossed in between the teeth of a colossal god and like being thrown into a vortex and like 100 d10s. like
fuck you, that's how many.
I don't have that many d10s.
Oh my god. Everybody, I need your d10s.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought it's worth mentioning that, like, in some ways the fact that it sets you on fire and you take d10s is kind of like an environmental effect. Like, kind of if other things set you on fire, they might also deal a d10 damage.
But yeah, we have been through a lot of fire enemies, and I don't think any of them have really made your character catch fire. Like, it's kind of that's a new thing.
I feel like the only thing I was going to say is I know that a creature that touches it or hits it with a melee attack within 5 feet takes damage. That's like Heated Body, the Azer. The metal golem sort of dwarf fellow. He had that ability, and a couple of other monsters have it as well. But obviously that's just like, if you hit me or you're close to me, you take damage. Whereas this also has I can step on you and then set you on fire, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Next up, illumination. It's a fire, so it sheds light. The elemental sheds bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light in an additional 30 feet, which it doesn't need because it has dark vision, so that's good. That's cool, I guess.
Well, like, I guess it's there because, like, of course it does that because it's fire. You know, it has to do
exactly,
that. I guess.
It's like
you
part
can
of
see
its abilities
it as well if you're in like a cave.
And, bright light and dim light can affect other things, and people might be curious about, like, I know, for example, the Way of Shadows monk cares about standing in dim light because then it can teleport. So, like, it might be curious about how far away from this thing do I need to get before I can teleport. So that kind of thing is useful. Water susceptibility. For every 5 feet the elemental moves in water, or for every gallon of water splashed on it, it takes 1 cold damage. That is not very susceptible. I feel like if you splashed 1 gallon of water on me, I'd take 1 cold damage. And I'm not even like made of fire. I'm just like a dude.
Yeah. Just a ice bucket challenge.
Fair enough. It doesn't seem that susceptible, but maybe it is.
Then I feel like that makes you kind of question, like, how much water is in this like torrent that I send at them, Because I remember
a gallon is like more than a liter. It's like
I think it's
3
like
liters.
2.5, 3 liters.
2.5 sounds right. Anyway, actions. Multi-attack. The elemental makes 2 touch attacks, and then it only has 1 melee attack, which is touch. Melee weapon attack, +6 to hit. That's interesting. That's the lowest hit bonus we've seen on the elemental so far. reach 5 feet. It doesn't have the nice 10 feet of the earth elemental. One target, hit 2d6 plus 3 or 10 on average fire damage. If the target is a creature or a flammable object, it ignites. Until a creature takes an action to douse the fire, the target takes 1d10 5 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. So same as if it walks on you, it sets you on fire.
Environmental damage, as you said. That's cool. I like that. I'm not sure. I'm just going to look over quickly at the water elemental. Okay. Well, I'll reserve my judgment for when we're finished with the water elemental.
That's absolutely fair. Before we do that, do we want to talk about the stuff we sort of mentioned about the design? First of all, Mikey, the thing you mentioned about fire, I thought that was actually a very good point. That like,
well, it's not looking at
hypnotic nature.
Yeah, looking at the water. It's one more charisma on the water, but like it makes sense that it's a bit more charismatic, I guess, than the air and the earth, because if you look at a fire, you're kind of just watching it all the time, and it's very hypnotic, and it's not that much more charisma, but like it makes sense that it's like a 7 instead of like 5.
Also,
you
fire's hot.
Nice.
I made that joke a second ago, but I don't think either of you heard it.
I guess we must not have.
I guess not. No, sorry, Tim.
You just tuned me out.
He's back on his bullshit. I'm just going to tune him out for a bit.
So we just turn him down to 0 on Discord.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn that. But like it's a small little thing, and it doesn't really make a difference in terms of the actual stat block. But it's just a nice little touch, I guess, of like, of course, it's a little bit more charismatic than air, because fire is kind of more charismatic than air if you think in that way. Like
I'm surprised it doesn't have a fly speed. Or like an alternative move speed.
I thought the exact same thing, Tim, when I read out the speed. That it has a 50-foot speed, but it cannot fly or move in any. Obviously, it has fire form; it can slip through small gaps, but it can't move in any unusual way.
Are they trying to say that like it needs like a source of ignition kind of thing, or it needs at least to be tethered?
Yeah, like it needs to be touching like some kind of fuel to be continue burning.
I don't know.
I don't know either, because I would have thought like fire. You think of
like a fireball.
Fireball, but also like kind of like in terms of generating like movement, like fire is the basis of like the steam engine, right? Like so you'd think like, oh well, heat generates lift, for example. Like, is there any way it can use that? Like, but anyway,
attach itself to a hot air balloon.
Yeah, or like, or expend its health to represent like rocket boosting to fly temporarily, that kind of thing.
That's cool.
The other thing I was going to say is, Mikey, on your point about sort of the hypnotic element of fire, would actually be kind of cool if that was like an ability that fire elementals had, perhaps at higher levels, that they could sort of hypnotize people.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of in the same way that like some fake creatures can do that. The idea that you sort of like. You just get dazed and you're just staring into the fire and just you can't move or think or do anything.
Yeah.
Other than that, I will mention that the previous editions of the fire elemental, quite similar to this, they set things on fire if they touch them. The big difference that struck me was fire elementals. So in this context, they have the ability or the weakness, I suppose, water susceptibility, right? That says when you splash water on them or they move through water, they take cold damage. The earlier one had that, but also had rules about. Actually, they had much stricter rules. It's actually kind of cool, these rules. I sort of like them. It says, a fire elemental cannot enter water or any other non-flammable liquid. A body of water is an impassable barrier unless the fire elemental can step or jump over it. And I sort of like that idea, like sort of like the salt circles, that you use to keep like spirits away. The idea of like a circle of water to keep an elemental away. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But also kind of more in terms of the actual design of monsters, fire elementals had vulnerability to cold damage. Basically kind of saying cold is like the damage type for ice and water. So we'll just say that they're vulnerable to cold. Because, for example, a lot of spells that actually a player would use that would deal cold damage would reference water or ice.
Yeah.
And so the notion that those would be, or even wind, and the notion that those would be effective at putting out a fire kind of makes sense. And instead, the fire elemental here has like a weird ability. Well, weird is maybe a bit cruel. An unusual ability that means it takes cold damage from another source, but it actually doesn't. It's not vulnerable to cold damage. So that one cold damage it takes isn't even like 2 cold damage. You know, it's just it's 1 cold damage, and if you deal cold damage to it, it's like, that's fine, I don't care.
It's also like, it says it can move in water in this definition, which is substantially more than a single gallon of water, I would argue, you know? So like, are they saying that you can have a fire elemental underwater, it just takes 1 damage every round, every 5 feet?
I'd assume that when they say for 5 feet of the elemental moves in water, that because it can't fly, it would be like if it passed through a puddle. I assume an elemental can't get into water, because you'd say that water is being splashed on it. Like, you know, if you're surrounded by water, it's like you're not being splashed anymore, you're submerged. So you've been infinitely splashed.
And smashed.
So I would assume that even though it's not like 100% clear in this rules text, that the intention is that the 5 feet of moving through water suggests water that doesn't, because remember, it's a large creature, right? Like, it's the size of a horse. So it's like, if there's less water than a horse, if a horse could get through this water, an elemental can get through this water.
Fair enough.
But it would obviously take damage doing that, because it would represent that it has to sort of splutter and cough its way through some of the water to reach you.
Maybe it should say every 5 feet it moves over water, because like we've established that it doesn't have the flight because of our presumption that it can't fly because it needs to be tethered. If it's tethered to water, then it takes damage. I think that makes sense to me.
And let's say for example, if you have like, let's say, a fire elemental in a bottle, and like hypothetically you want to like, I want to kill this fire elemental, so you open up underneath in the ocean. It's in 5 feet technically. It's in the 5 foot square. So it takes 1 damage. And if like, I guess if the turn ends, does it take another damage if it stays there? Or this probably never happened, but like, is this like, I'm just kind of trying to think.
Every 5 foot it moves. Yeah. I think we're getting too deep into this. Strange.
I think if it was in the ocean, it will just die. Personally, I think it'll just be dying.
I think if you replace the word if you said instead for every gallon of water splashed on it, or that it is submerged by, for example.
Yeah.
And to infer as well that the very act of being in water is damaging, because at the moment you're suggesting movement either from the elemental or from the water.
Yeah.
Because splashing water is an action, right? Like, water on its own doesn't splash, just sits there and does nothing.
Yeah.
But water thrown from a bucket splashes, and equally, like moving through water means you have moved. So both this sentence is written in a manner that suggests that there's always movement going on. And the problem is that D&D is turn-based, so stuff like, okay, well, the elemental ended its turn in water, is it splashed or not? And like that kind of thing, this language doesn't clarify that, because it uses sort of active terminology, like movement and splashing.
And I like to just use the like what it says written down here on the other page, where it says water can halt its destructive progress, causing the fire elemental to shrink back, hissing and smoking in pain and rage. So it doesn't want to be in water, it's bad, and if it is in water, it'll halt its progress, and it'll just kind of, like, if there's a lot of water, it'll probably just die in a few turns or something, you know, like it'll be a lot more. But as he said, you can't really it's hard to write that down on a stat block in terms of like a fight, you know. It's kind of hard to say that, I guess, but I don't know. Yeah,
it could definitely be clearer. I think stuff like having rules text. I mean, I think there is actually a rule. I think it's not in 3rd edition, but I think in Pathfinder, there's a rules line that just says for fire elementals, like, if this entity is ever submerged in water, it instantly dies. It just kind of claims outright, look, if this thing ever gets in enough water to be submerged, it is made of fire, so it dies immediately, and just kind of clarifies that. Although I think there's a cool rule in Pathfinder where, like, some fire elementals can turn into steam elementals by going in water, which is cool. I like that idea, like metamorphosis. Feels like it suits the elements. But yeah, if we're going with the idea that, like, it's just not, it doesn't like water, then I think, just the way the rule is worded is a little unusual, because again, it sort of suggests, like, for water to be splashed on it, someone has to move it. Whereas if I stood in a puddle, the puddle is not splashing me. You know, it's just on my feet. And like, do I take damage for that? Will I take damage when I leave the puddle? Like, what's going on?
You'll take damage if you
because if I'll take damage when I leave,
puddle.
yeah. If I take damage from leaving the puddle, then I'll just stand in the puddle. But obviously, that's not what the fire elemental should do, because it hates water, so it should be doing something else.
DMs at home, use your best judgment on that one. So
yeah,
whatever situation.
I think it's very self-evident what would happen.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to talk about the difference between our assumptions and rules text.
Yeah, because a lot of people take rules text very seriously, and they would kind of like to almost use the flaws in the text to kind of rules lawyer themselves into funny, weird situations, and that can be a bit of fun. But also, it can kind of be like, that's a bit, halting the game,
Yeah, and it's also worth acknowledging that in the context of the elemental, that it's both a creature the DM can use, but also a creature the player can use, because there are spells that allow you to summon elementals. And so in the context of the players, they are at the DM's mercy. So if they want to summon a fire elemental to solve a problem, they need to know, based on perhaps the context of the problem they find themselves in, if I summon this fire elemental, will that stream of water kill it instantly, or can I avoid it in some way, right? Like, the rules clarity helps the DM and the player understand the context of like, okay, if your wizard wants to summon a fire elemental to solve this puzzle, but there's a stream of water that's like maybe too wide for you to make a bridge or whatever, like how else can we get it across? Or if it goes in the water, is there so much water that it simply dies instantly? And that sort of information can be worth knowing. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anyway,
it's good to it's good to talk about. It's good to kind of
hash it out before you cast the spell for the first time is the best way to do it. It's not always easy to remember, but it's like probably the easiest thing to do. But also just it's made of fire. If it goes in water, it's going to have a bad time.
And that's only one monster, ladies and gentlemen, that we've talked about. So
speaking of water,
hey, go for 10. Show us who's boss.
I'm the boss. Water,
get him, Tim.
Elemental.
Kick his ass, Tim.
Kick his ass, Tim. Sorry, go. Last one we did.
Water elemental. Large elemental. Neutral. Again. Armor. Oh, sorry. Armor class. Oh, wow. Does your guys'
it's the same.
manual?
So,
Wow.
So
it's not in bold.
Armor is in bold.
Oh, yeah.
And then it says class 14.
Class isn't.
It's not in bold.
It's a class 14
Armor,
elemental.
Class 14.
It's an armor. Class 14. That's interesting. I wonder how that slipped.
How that happened. Yeah, no idea.
Cool. Natural armor of 14. Hit points 114, which is 12d10 plus 48. It has a speed of 30 foot over land and a swim speed of 90 feet. It has a strength of 18, a dexterity of 14, a constitution of 18, intelligence 5, wisdom 10, and charisma 8. So it is the most charismatic, but equals our earth elemental for the least intelligent. But water's not hotter than fire. That's ridiculous. Funny that we have it is scales perfectly. It's 5 is the earth, 6 is the air, 7 is the fire, and then water is 8. So they have 5, 6, 7, 8.
That is interesting.
It's kind of funny. I wonder why they decided to do that.
I do. So do I, yeah.
Damage resistances. It is resistant to acid for some reason. Oh, well, presumably because it would neutralize it. It is also resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. It is immune to poison damage. And it is immune to the conditions exhaustion, grapple, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, and unconscious. It has a 60-foot dark vision for its senses and a passive perception of 10, and it speaks Aquan, which is the language of the elemental planes of water, and challenge rating 5 for 1,800 experience points. Now, what would we spend our 1,800 experience points on? I think I would buy just like loads of nickels, loads of tiny little coins. I'd cash it in and then just bathe in it.
I'd do a few quarters so I can go and play the Star Wars arcade game and finally beat it.
That's
finally
much
beat Darth
better.
Vader.
I'd change it into euros and then go down to IMC Dunleary and then beat Time Crisis 2 finally.
IMC's closed, man.
IMC's closed, man.
It's closed?
I did that though.
It's closed for the lockdown.
I with a friend of mine, we had a lot of money and we played the Time Crisis 2 machine in the IMC cinema. And then
I didn't even realize it had. Where is this? Where
it
is
was
the Time Crisis
do you
machine?
know where? It's such a niche thing. Do you
I
know
don't
where
think
the
it has it
ticket? Do you know
anymore.
where the ticket guys are when you
Yes.
go in the before you go to the escalators? You give them the ticket, and you're like you get let in. There used to be a Time Crisis machine there because there wasn't like there wasn't a basement. That wasn't. They added them later.
Oh, right.
So-
I see. Right. I was wondering, was it where the new screen was, screen 13 or whatever? Like, was it there before screen 13?
No idea.
No,
But
I don't know.
that makes sense.
Oh yeah, actually, it could have been there. I mean, that's one on the ground floor, right?
Yes, the one
so
there.
fucking neat.
This is for us. This is for no one else.
This is for us.
Maybe at the end of the podcast.
Nah, keep it in.
Maybe, yeah.
No, it's staying right here.
Staying right here.
All right, so it has two abilities. The water elemental, getting back on topic. It has a water form. The elemental can enter a hostile creature's space and stop there. It can move through a space as narrow as 1 inch without squeezing. Incredible. It has a freeze ability, which... if the elemental takes cold damage, it partially freezes. Its speed is reduced by 20 feet until the end of its next turn. That's an incredible ability.
Wow.
It's more of an effect. You've used cold damage, you've activated my freeze ability.
It's like the water susceptibility. It's this kind of a thing that it happens to it.
Yeah.
This thing happens. Do you know what I was thinking? Completely off topic, but do you know the way there's these abilities? You can actually look at a list of these kinds of abilities in like the DMG. I think they have like a big list of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I was thinking about either just for myself or for an episode or something, just rolling and getting a few of these random abilities and trying to make a monster out of it. You know, that sounds like it would be a bit of fun.
Like a weird combination. Imagine you had freeze and water susceptibility.
Yeah, and like just kind of making whatever comes to mind with that. So who knows? We'll either do something with that or it's just for me. But try it out at home.
A fun creative potential. Oh, that's fun. Cool. It has several options for actions, just as many as the air elemental had. It has a multi-attack. The elemental makes 2 slam attacks. The slam attack itself is a melee weapon attack, set +7 to hit, reach 5 feet, 1 target, and a hit deals 13 at 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. And then it has a recharge ability, similar to the air elemental, that recharges on a 4 to 6. So you have a 50% chance of getting it back each turn after you have used it. Each creature in the elemental space must make a DC 15 strength saving throw. On a failure, a target takes 13 at 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. If it is large or smaller, it is also grappled. Escape DC 14. Until this grapple ends, the target is restrained and unable to breathe unless it can breathe water. If the saving throw is successful, the target is pushed out of the elemental space. The elemental can grapple 1 large creature, or up to 2 medium or smaller creatures at one time with this ability. At the start of each of the elemental's turns, each grappled takes 13 at 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. As an action, a creature within 5 feet of the elemental can pull a creature or an object out of it by succeeding on a DC 14 strength check. Oh boy. I mean, I feel like that's a reasonable amount of like descriptive text for what it was. Like, it's not too much. Like, they definitely done worse to us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's that one's kind
Absolutely.
of similar to Whirlwind.
It is.
kind of in a way. You know, kind of how it's laid out, how it's like what
Yes.
it kind of does. Like I know one of them kind of pushes stuff around while this one grapples and
like keeps you in its zone.
Yeah.
Whereas the whirlwind just sort of knocks everyone about and
That's kind of
kicks
fun.
everyone out.
Yeah.
If you had an air elemental and a water elemental in the same room, the air elemental would push you into the water elemental, and the water elemental would hold you.
that would be a very
be
cool
kinda cool.
encounter. Fighting them both at the same time. I think that's
Air
very
and
cool. Tim.
water.
Air
Yeah.
and water. Yeah. So once again, this water elemental is a classic example of the does the one thing that's pretty cool monster. And yep, as I said in the last episode, it is a 50% chance of you getting it on a recharge, so you probably use it quite a bit. and you would want to use it because it's a fun ability, and it's the most fun out of all the abilities here, or the actions in for this guy. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It was something interesting that I just thought of there. So in the descriptive text of the water elemental we had 2 pages ago, it says a water elemental is a cresting wave that rolls across the ground, becoming nearly invisible as it courses as it. I think it's supposed to be as it courses through, but in my book it says at it courses through, which is wrong. Good work. It engulfs creatures that stand against it, filling their mouths and lungs as easily. Which, by the way, is that weird? Like, imagine like crawling inside somebody to kill them.
That's
anyway.
creepy.
That's not what that's not the point I want to make. Filling their mouths and lungs as easily as it smothers flame. The water elemental is not immune or even resistant to fire damage.
And
is that weird, or
kind of is?
Just
yeah.
Just a thought.
Well, my presumption is that like fire damage would turn it to steam, which is water vapor, but it's not like liquid water anymore, so that is technical damage to it. Like, you could argue that it is extinguishing the flame, but it takes a body of water energy to extinguish a flame or to cool something down. So
that's absolutely fair. It was just something I was curious about.
Yeah, I would absolutely believe it though, or even resist it.
As far as I can tell, in some ways it makes sense, because I actually have a suspicion that. So something that's interesting is that the none of the elementals have. I mean, okay, water obviously can whelm fire, but with that exception, none of these elementals actually have the upper hand on each other. So if we assume that, I think that the assumption in the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons is that the different realms of the elements are oftentimes in conflict. And so if we sort of then used these stat blocks as the basis for that conflict, and the water elemental was immune to fire, it would be like, well, how come the water elementals haven't wiped out the fire elementals? Because they can't be hurt by them.
Okay.
So perhaps it's sort of like a cosmological decision that, like, it's also worth mentioning, just because I have it up here, that the 3rd edition water elemental didn't resist fire either. So this is not a new decision. This is an existing decision. So I wonder, is it that kind of thing of like, these elementals are sort of supposed to be like, quote unquote, in balance, so they should all be able to hurt each other?
That's all things true.
Okay. Oh.
So just thought, one other thing that I think I should mention is that the water elemental from 3rd edition had an ability that the water elemental in 5th edition doesn't have, which I feel like could be part of its water form, but maybe for space isn't included. It's actually just a really simple ability, but I like it. It's called Drench. The elemental's touch puts out torches, campfires, exposed lanterns, and other open flames of non-magical origin if they are of large size or smaller. The creature can dispel magical fire it touches as though it were casting dispel magic.
Ooh.
Wow, cool.
So I just thought that was cool. The idea that the water elemental has both the ability to put out fire, right, by sitting on it because it's water, but also the notion that we kind of return to that idea of like elementals as magical beings, and the idea that a water elemental can elect to dispel a magical fire. I thought that was a cool idea that sort of made, because a lot of these abilities are very primordial in a way that doesn't reference the magic of Dungeons and Dragons, with the exception of the fact that obviously non-magic weapons don't hurt them. It's not really important that they are made of magic. They are mostly elemental when you fight them. But I think that idea of them having 1 or 2 abilities that actually interact with the magic of the world, and maybe even give them cool ideas, like it'd be interesting to see like a water elemental basically counterspell a fireball. The idea that it swallows it up and collapses inward and just a wisp of smoke comes out. That kind of video would be very cool.
Yeah. That's that ability's just cool just to take and put in, to the water elemental, because I like kind of more like the idea of just like prestidigitation kind of stuff, where it's not really, it's just kind of like just able to put out smaller fires instead of like putting out huge stuff, like kind of maybe just the odd like candle and stuff that whenever it comes in it can just take it out instantly, even though that would happen anyway. But yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. But third thing It engulfs creatures that stands against it, filling their mouths and lungs as easily as it smothers flames. And we just talked for about 10 minutes about flames not being that easy to smother, so I don't think that'd be pretty good, guys. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention the final line of the Whelm ability. As an action, a creature within 5 feet of the elemental can pull a creature or an object out of it by succeeding a DC 14 strength check. But no part of the ability references objects. It says that when it uses its ability, it grabs every creature inside its zone and keeps them. And it doesn't actually mention at any stage that it keeps objects.
Maybe it's like objects that are on your person,
on the players.
Like it could be that like another party member is trying to hand you a wand or something or a scroll to pull something off. But I only thought it was worth mentioning because I thought that was interesting. That to me, that part of the rules text is like, hey, you can pull objects out of it, and I'm like, ooh, cool. Like the water elemental tries to steal your treasure and run off with it, and you can pull it out. But then the rules text of Whelm doesn't let it pick up objects, and I just thought that was interesting.
Perhaps it is a commentary on the possibility that when somebody dies, they are no longer a creature, they're just an object, as they are no longer living.
Wow.
Perhaps
he's wondering why do you shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane.
I will also mention that the 3rd edition Water Elemental does not have Whelm, it has Vortex, and Vortex is a lot like the Air Elemental's Whirlwind in that it is a rules nightmare. It also has a paragraph explaining what happens if it's touching the ground, which I refuse to go into.
Very well.
But there is a fun detail where it says that the elemental can eject any carried creatures whenever it wishes, depositing them wherever the vortex happens to be. A summoned elemental always ejects trapped creatures before returning to its home plane. Something about that really made me laugh. Like, no free rides. Get out of here.
Fuck these guys. I'm out of here.
You guys know the rules.
Yeah.
That's fun.
One point that I was going to make while we were looking at the stat blocks, the Earth Elemental is the only one that has a 10-foot range, despite being the only one that is really kind of solid.
Yeah,
which is strange.
That's a very good point.
The rest of them make sense to have an extra long range.
Yes.
We're all the same size.
Another thing I've noticed about all the elementals, which this makes a lot of sense, and you know exactly why. But the Earth Elemental can be grappled, and the rest of them can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the only one that you can get a grip on.
It's corporeal.
Just because, of course, because of that.
It's actually kind of a shame that the fire elemental can't be grappled, because it would be cool if someone like, for example, like tieflings have resistant to fire damage.
Oh yeah,
it'd be kind of cool if they just sort of went like, I'll just tank it and just grabbed the fire elemental. I think that would be a very cool moment.
Yeah,
sort of like taming the flame. That's pretty. Nice. That's a pretty fun idea.
Yeah, it would. But it would be cool, like, because like if you could grapple it, but you still just took the fire form and fire touch effects. But it's like, no, I want to take it anyway, just to kind of show that you're badass, I guess.
I mean, like the idea of say like a barbarian mid rage, right, being burned alive as it grabs his fire elemental and just plunging into a pool of water, like Gandalf and the Balrog, like that would be very cool.
Shall we continue on to Desert Town before we disclose too many of our cool ideas? Let's do it. All right. Bing, bing.
That little bell. We're going to have like a boxing bell, Tim?
No, it's a dessert bell.
It's a dinner bell.
Oh, I thought it was like
dessert bell. Of course.
It's like a fight bell because we're going to go in the Matrix room.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
which will now be like a Matrix or more like a Rocky room now, because if we're going to make them fight in a boxing ring.
Yo, Adrian.
If I can change and you can change, we all can change. And that's when Rocky defeated communism.
There you go.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thanks, Rocky.
So elementals in the Matrix in the room of nothing.
We're not allowed to call it the Matrix room anymore.
Yeah, we got a call from the Wachowskis and they're going to kick our asses.
Yeah, we got a call from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Gotta call, yeah, Mr. Matrix got me on the phone.
Yeah.
Mr.
Edwards.
Anderson. My name's not Anderson.
So the fire elemental, I think, is a little more interesting of the two.
Mm-hmm.
They have an ability that lets them punish people just by stepping on them or stepping near them. That gives you a really clear incentive, along with their high movement speed, to just touch everyone in the party.
Yeah.
Which is great fun. Literally set everyone on fire. And of course, it has that classic thing that, like, it says until someone takes an action to douse it, they're on fire, which is great because it's so frustrating. Because the only way to get rid of it is to spend your whole action getting rid of it, which no one wants to do. So, and that's pretty interesting. And then other than that, it'll just go around touching people, setting them on fire.
Just buzzing between everybody, just poking everyone, lighting them on fire.
The only other thing I can think of is that it says water susceptibility, and if I recall correctly, is it create food and drink? Actually creates quite a lot of water.
Yeah.
Let me get this, but I think it's a surprising quantity of water. Yeah, create food and water. Sorry, not create food and drink. It is just water. So it is a 3rd level spell. So in fairness, not everybody can pull it off. Yeah, this is it. You create 45 pounds of food and 30 gallons of water.
Oh wow.
And I think it's
well, you create the food as well, so you'll be throwing like ham and
like delicious ham
and
that,
a box
that has to be
a box of cereal or something.
There's also something water. There's another spell for water. Create or destroy water. This is it.
There we go. Conjure water.
Yeah. Create or destroy water. So this is only 1st level. This is much easier. You either create or destroy water. Thanks.
That's it. That's the spell.
There you go.
That's it. That's all you get. You create up to 10 gallons of clean water within range in an open container. Alternatively, the rain falls in a 30-foot cube within range, extinguishing exposed flames in the area.
Cool.
So
can you create more with a higher spell slot? Anything like that?
Yeah, you can upcast, and you get an extra. You get an extra 10 gallons per upcast
because it has like. It has 102 hit points.
Yes.
And if you throw all those gallons at it, it'll be, if it's 10, you'll throw... it'll just be 10 cold damage. But 20...
Yeah, that's worse than like a normal 1st level spell.
Like if you spend a 10th level spell
that doesn't
with
exist.
your water.
But it might be fun for like the last little bit, and then you figure it out. Like, hold on, I can do this, and then you throw it at it, and it weakens it severely.
Just
you know,
pour some.
I mean,
water
of the two, it seems probably more useful to make the rain because then presumably it wouldn't want to go in there.
Yeah.
You create like a denial zone. Sorry, I'm just reading the second part of the spell. Destroy water. You destroy up to 10 gallons of water in an open container within range. Alternatively, you destroy fog in a 30-foot cube within range. Just the idea of like, I hate fog.
Get out of here, fog. So I think one of the coolest things that we could do with all of these guys is to fight all of them at once and then just try to think of cool combinations of stuff that you could do with them.
Yeah, because I think if you're fighting any combination of these... I feel like myself, I would have you fight 2 of them, and then halfway through the fight, they combine. Or they all combine together, like they're a Power Rangers villain or something. But like if you're fighting like a air elemental and a fire elemental, then maybe halfway through the fight, they turn into the whirling vortex, and like, whoa, second phase of the fight.
My first thoughts are like the earth elemental stands behind the fire elemental and then like starts shooting coal out of itself through the fire elemental and at you, dealing like bludgeoning and fire damage.
That's very
because
cool.
it lights it on fire. Or like if you use the freeze ability on the water elemental and a chunk of it freezes inside of it like a little ice cube, and then the earth elemental grabs it out of it and then just fucks it at you, dealing bludgeoning and cold damage. Yeah, and then the air elemental can like work with the fire elemental to like hyperoxygenate him so that he blazes a little harder, so that for like the next turn, if you're standing near to him, all of the elemental fire damage does like 2d10 maybe, kind of thing.
Or even just like the fire elemental as well, just hanging, like it hangs, or even though the earth elemental is not like it's not immune to fire though. But imagine it just being hanging around at the Earth Elemental, and then like the Earth Elemental gains like a heated body ability, where if you try to hit it, then like you take a bit of fire damage or something, or like it's whatever the heated body ability happens, I guess, whatever that does exactly. So
I was thinking something along those lines for like if you are a person that can summon elementals and another person in the party can summon elementals, you could probably do like a joint elemental where one of you summons earth and one of you summons fire in the same like space. So you make this like fire earth elemental, like this flaming coal-bodied extra large elemental, and because they are both beholden to your will, they stay in the same place, and like as long as you are like coordinated in what you want to do, they stay together in this amplified powerful body.
I really like the idea of sailing in a big ship and fighting against water elementals, because it's like they're, maybe the sailors be like, oh no, these waters, they come alive and they try to bring you down, and then like, oh god, they actually do. But just these, maybe you're trying to find it, but it's like going through the water and sneaking around, and you're trying to find out what exactly is the elemental. So maybe you have to do like some sort of like I don't know what kind of ability would make you see it. Like I don't really like find
maybe fairy fire.
Maybe fairy fire. Yeah.
Well,
what do you think, Dan?
To go back to the story I was going to tell.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Let's hear it.
in part one. Yeah. It was hinted at in part one.
Exactly.
Tell us, Dad.
Blood. We had a game where we were in a dungeon, and we went through a part of the dungeon that was flooded, and we were attacked by an water elemental, and it basically had that sort of rule set where the idea was that you actually can't tell that it's next to you. You don't know where it is. You basically can't see it because it's invisible as long as it's in water. And you basically had to, like, if I recall correctly, we either had to simply search or we could attack blindly into the spaces around us and hope that water contained a water elemental.
Because something like sea invisibility wouldn't work because it's not invisible. It just is water.
Yes, yeah, and the other cool part of it was this flooded part of the dungeon, but also it was a collapsed like ruin. So parts of the tunnels were so narrow that only the water elemental could get through. So it could actually circle around us and attack us from unusual angles. And if I recall correctly, and a friend of the podcast, Stephen, can confer with this because he was in that game as well. I believe that Fairy Fire was cast on the elemental to spot them, and I think that the person who cast it was struck by the elemental and lost concentration. So that we had them for a bit and then lost them again. I don't know if we did actually lose them again, but that's kind of what my memory says. But that's very foggy. I mean, this is a game that took place, I believe, in 2019 at some stage. So a long time ago now. But I do still remember it. It was very interesting to see, and it did literally use that idea that like a water elemental in water is indistinguishable from, like from its native element. Like there's no way to tell. Like it was basically that like when it attacked us, we were like, it's there right now because it just attacked us. And I believe the other strategy we started using was like we would ready attacks so that if it attacked us, we could immediately strike back. But obviously that's like not as reliable, because if it doesn't attack us, or if it attacks someone who didn't ready an attack, then they've wasted their turn. And it was a very cool fight because it was like we were reasonably low level, and obviously one water elemental is actually, as you can see here, only a challenge 5 monster. But the context of the fight, right, the flooded dungeon and the thin tunnels and stuff really elevated it into more than just fight this one monster who's maybe appropriate challenge rating. It was more like have this moment where you are in a creature's native environment and you have every kind of disadvantage stacked up against you, and can you still overcome that? And that's very, very cool, very heroic.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even do something similar then. I know we did the air elemental last week, but I'm going to do a little bit on the air elemental here. Maybe with the air elemental.
I think we can do all the elementals now. I think now we're in the free zone.
Yeah, the big wrap-up part. So yeah, air elementals, you can do something similar with that. Maybe you're up in a high tower and you're kind of climbing like climbing up the tower, or you're kind of on a staircase that's going around it, and you're just in a place where it's just a lot of wind, and it's like and there's a lot of like dark fog and stuff, and these air elementals would just be like flying by and trying to hit you off or something, or if you're in like an airship, it's trying to do the same thing, and maybe you just can't really tell what it looks like. All you can kind of see is probably the shape of maybe a face, and maybe it do a similar thing, so you can kind of do something similar with the air elemental, and I guess maybe like all of them in its own element, I guess, now that we're saying that.
I was going to say, I think it's going to be most common for the water and the earth guys, I think, to be able to disappear into their elements, because it's pretty rare for fire to be so like voluminous that it would consume a large being. And there's a lot of air around as well, but I think it would kind of like it basically just turns
air you're breathing.
Yeah, that's air.
I did that one last time.
I think it's kind of harder to reason with like having the air elemental, because they're supposed to be like, aren't they like supposed to be just whirlwinds, funneling cloud of whirling air?
They're supposed to be like little tornadoes, I believe.
Yeah, so I don't think I would probably make it as easy for them. If you are in the midst of like a hurricane or it is tornado season, then maybe they would blend in with the rest of what's going on around you, but you might have other issues to handle on top of it there being a potential air elemental.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of something like in the middle of a hurricane or something. You're going through a storm or something, because if you're doing the ship encounter, like I said, maybe they're like both water and air are attacking you,
Yeah.
It's very much like it's a very fantasy version of like, a perfect storm or something. I don't know. Like,
yeah, that's awesome. I like that a lot.
To return to the idea of the elementals individually, separate them, spread them out. What is our feeling? How do we feel about them, like individually as monsters? If we were to run into them one by one, maybe over the course of 4 distinct games, I think the one thing that really strikes me about each of them, I suppose I can go through these one by one. The air elemental, I really like the whirlwind ability, but I don't feel like it's big enough. Because the air elemental is only large, so it's actually not a huge area that they cover with their spell. With their whirlwind, it's not even a spell. Apologies. But if we compared it to a lot of spells of a similar like notion, right, like a similar power, a lot of them would be larger areas. So I think I would either, as we discussed in the previous episode, make it a persistent ability where the air elemental kind of changes forms, right, and turns into a whirlwind and just knocks things around. Or have it be that it affects a larger area and is in a kind of an immediate recharge ability. Because it's only the creatures in the elemental space, so it's only a 2x2 area. So it's probably quite difficult to really get more than even one party member in it, maybe 2.
Unless you're in like narrow tunnels and you're kind of
But then if you're in narrow tunnels, you can't get thrown far, so the other part of the ability is like less useful.
Well, the other part of the ability is if you hit something, you take extra damage.
Yeah, but you get thrown 20 feet and there's a chance you hit another creature, so you kind of want to be in a place where you can toss the players at each other. Like I think that's
fair.
I think that's the ideal situation, is that you throw them into each other because that's funny and memorable. I do think actually that a very kind of a straightforward fight to make an air elemental interesting would be like traversing a series of platforms over a significant drop, so that if it successfully whirlwinds you, you're pushed to the edge of a platform, and then you get like an extra deck save to like grab the ledge before you slip and fall. And maybe the players preempt that by doing things like tying each other together, and so they don't like drop instantly. But yeah, that could be fun. Like just something that's like gives a bit more like danger to the whirlwind. If you don't want it to be like you die instantly, don't have it be like over a big void. Have it be over like water, but there's eels or piranhas or something.
A giant squid.
Or a giant squid.
Giant octopus.
A giant squid, yeah, great suggestion.
I was going to say like smaller, like kind of jagged, but other smaller platforms where if you fall on them, you'll take a bit of damage, but you can kind of like...
Oh, yeah, that'd
be
cool.
possibly catch on to them, and like depending on how good the roll is for like the save is, maybe you land on a higher platform than the lowest one there, something like that.
That's fun. I like that. Yeah, you're almost like degrees of failure, like how badly you roll is how far you fall.
Yeah, and then like one of the platforms has like a few crawling claws or something on it that are trying to grab you. Or at the bottom, there's crawling claws. Those hands?
The gross little hands, yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say spiders, but I wanted to go more D&D. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And the Earth Elemental, I said in the last episode that there's not a whole lot going on with it in the stat block.
Yes, agreed. Strong agreed.
If I was just fighting it, it wouldn't be that memorable to me. It'll just be like, we're fighting an Earth Elemental. That's fine. Let's just whittle it down. It's an encounter, but it's not as if we're talking about if I would be happy with fighting these one by one in different games, I wouldn't really remember the Earth Elemental as much personally.
I would very strongly agree with that, Mikey. I think, I sort of said there that that fight with the water elemental was elevated by the context, and I think the Earth Elemental is an example of a creature that I would say not even should have. Like, the water elemental is cool, but this context made it a great fight. The Earth Elemental, I think, needs that context, or it won't even be a memorable fight, because it's just a big thing, right? It's just 126 hit points with resistance that comes up to you and punches you.
But if you're fighting in like a rocky, almost like a maze kind of place where you can't, you guys, the players can't,
like a labyrinth.
Yeah. And the players can't really go around. They have to run around to get to each other. But these guys can just walk. Like, I like to picture a few of them in the labyrinth, and they can just walk through.
And, I would actually. That is such a good idea that I want to just bounce off that for a bit. The idea that the Earth Elementals are guarding. So the players are after treasure, because treasure is always your basic reward, right? Like being good people and trying to save places are all noble, but ultimately, if you go, there's a magic item here, the players will they will do whatever. Like, if you're like, you need to kill each other to get this magic item, they will figure out a way to do it. They're like, if we let the cleric kill the rest of us, he can resurrect us. That's the kind of shit they'll come up with. Like, they will do anything for a magic item. So it's always a magic item. So there's a magic item at the center of this labyrinth, and the labyrinth is guarded by Earth Elementals, right? And so what you do is, during the fight, they run up to party members and then grab them and then run through a wall with them and separate the party that way. And just leave them in different parts of the dungeon, and then the party have to figure out where they are and regroup and deal with traps individually and stuff like that. The idea that you get that classic bit of it's like the paladin or the meathead barbarian gets to the logic puzzle, and they're like, oh, I wish the wizard was here, and the wizard has to move a big heavy thing, and he's like, I wish the barbarian was here.
And during the campaign they were making fun of each other, but this is the moment you're like, oh, they actually like each other, don't they?
It's like they actually rely on each other, and exactly, they realize what they lack without each other. That can be fun.
As Daniel mentioned, it's kind of the most interesting, even in the Matrix room, completely by itself, because it can harass everyone at once, basically. It's the most broadly able to deal damage, and hence is probably the most broadly able to bring people low. It'll interrupt your action economy. It'll make you take those saves. And
for concentrating and stuff like that. Yeah,
and I really like it as an assassin, sending it to your party in the middle of the night. And then it burns down the hut you guys are staying in.
Yeah. Just like I did to you guys.
Did you do that?
That's where I got it from, I guess. I burned down Dan's house.
He burned down my character's house. Remember, it was we established that I lived in this nice house, and it was my mother's, and she's buried in the garden.
Oh, yeah.
And, you guys stayed the night, and then
you bought a nice cutting board with a
knife. A nice cutting board, with a posh
fancy knife.
As I think as a gift to thank me for letting you guys crash. Yeah. And then it turned out it was possessed by an evil fire element, and he burned my house.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, thanks.
Dude, we're sorry for the for that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Good times.
But anyway, Tim, sorry I forgot about that encounter, but would you like to explain that encounter, I guess, even though we just went through it there?
I mean, yeah, that was basically it. There's a character in my game that owns a shop, and he gives out gifts kind of willy-nilly to people amongst the city, because he does it under the pretext of helping everybody out. If he gives things to people because he has so much money, he's kind of a philanthropist kind of in disguise. Yeah, he's disguising himself as a philanthropist, but it turns out he has these evil motives.
He's the baddie.
Yes. They bought a nice cutting board for Daniel's character, and he gave them a cool knife with it, because he was like, oh, you can have this as well. And then you're like, oh, that's nice. And then in the pommel was quite a large ruby.
Yes.
And it burst open, and there was a fire elemental.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
which is also obviously the magic item. Is it like gem of summoning elemental or whatever it's called? Like
basically.
there's actually the item in the 5e book that's just like a gem that summons elemental. So it's like just one of those.
So more magically,
but probably trapped to go off at night.
Yeah.
And fuck up your nice house.
Maybe a magical eye could be able to see, that's close to a fire elemental stone.
Yeah.
You look into it and then.
You guys didn't do a detect magic. I would have given it to you.
No, we didn't.
I was a fighter.
Yeah.
like I was, if I recall correctly, you like the party without me went to get the item and came back and presented it to me, and I was actually the bard, so I was the spellcaster.
Yeah.
But as far as I was concerned, I just got a gift from my friends, and I was like, yeah, why would I detect magic this? That'd be a weird thing
Turns
to do.
out it was a prank.
It's a prank cheese board that when you cut cheese with it explodes.
Yeah, my mother turned into an earth elemental because she started spinning in her grave. So it's pretty,
Nice.
hey,
so that is a way of destroying one of your character's family homes. That's very.
Yep.
I think that's the reason I remember it, is because we had established that it was like
a beloved family home.
My house.
Yeah, like you were the only person from the city.
Yes, yes.
The most invested.
Which is why you guys needed to crash in my house. Yeah.
Sorry.
That was a good fight. No, it was great.
Yeah.
No. It was great. Like it was a great moment of. It was as far as I'm concerned, it was a fantastic moment because the whole point of the campaign, and Tim, I hope you don't mind. You don't think I'm spoiling it by saying this.
Go ahead.
But like the whole point of the campaign was like the world was ending, right? Like the city was burning, and I think it was such a great idea to like actually start with like your house is on fire, right? Like something really personal, like, oh my god, my house is on fire, like that's mine, and then to kind of get out of the house and be like, oh, the city is burning. Like, why aren't the fire brigade here? It's because they're busy. Like,
and then it's like, oh, actually the world is burning. There's a lot more.
Yes,
everything's
exactly,
going wrong here.
Really natural, like expanding the scope and kind of both making your problem seem kind of petty in some ways and kind of undermining them, but also like giving you like a shared compassion with the world, right? Like if you go somewhere else and people like, my house was destroyed, you're like, hey, me too, right? Like I'm not an itinerant campaigner who's just from somewhere who just showed up to kill goblins and get treasure. Like, yeah, I lost my house in the city fires and I actually relate to you now, and now my character has a reason to care, and because I'm playing my character, I also understand that, right? Like fictionally. So like, yeah, I thought it was great. I think that's the reason it sticks in my head, because it was such a great idea of like, start with like the really personal problem, but then elaborate to explain it's actually a problem everywhere, which was very
citywide
cool.
And then worldwide.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean that's also a point for like, you came to me with like, I think it was either I asked you if you wanted to be from the city, or you had mentioned that you wanted to be from the city. So like I worked with you on that.
Yes.
I mean, you know, there were the seeds of commitment to a place, and then because we had decided that, like, it was in your backstory that you were from this place, so that investment was kind of already there.
Which was
so
nice as well.
Listen to your players and talk to your players. Yeah. Like I like to actually talk to my players about their character's history so that I can try to work it in. I haven't like DM'd enough games in a row that we've been able to fully go to fruition with my plans with all of it, but that's more gripes.
I mentioned it ages ago. I wanted to make like a Monster Hunter kind of character, and then you just like gave me a monster hunting association to be in, really, and it was fun. You know, like, oh, these kinds of people actually exist in this world and are like this, you know. So like I was like, cool, great, it's cool. Actually, I'm not like, it's not a weird out of nowhere kind of character. So
you're not the weird guy. You're like a member of this organization of maybe weird people, but at least you've got a collection.
It's a bit like when I played that same character in Steven's game, where I was just a weird homeless person who hunted monsters, because I was like, my second character has died. And then they all were around me going like, so who do you want to play next? Like, fuck it, I'll just play an old character I played before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so touched that you wanted to use the character that we built together multiple times. Like, I thought that was so nice.
Man, Lucas is a great character.
Yeah,
he's cool.
I always played Lucas, and like the first game was with you, Tim, and I think he's a character that is kind of originally from your world, Tim, and kind of suits in your world, and is like, that's like the purest Lucas, but I feel like I can kind of throw him into any situation in any game now, because he is kind of like very just, you know, heroic protagonist kind of monster hunting fight boy, basically. So
and a little bit fleshed out, and like he's a good like template to be thrown anywhere.
Yeah, it's like comic multiverses, right? It's like you have the kind of original, the best and brightest Lucas in Tim's game, but then it's like the Lucas template can be translated into other settings, and when it does, you're like, oh well, maybe instead of this thing, it's this because I'm in a different setting, but fundamentally, I'm still playing Lucas.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys don't do that, don't feel like scared that you have to make a new character every time, because I do. I repeat characters all the time because
I think if you've got like a quote unquote like type, if you're like, I love playing this.
Yeah,
I think you should absolutely just embrace that and be like, I love playing this kind of character. This is their name, right? This is what they do. This is what like their thing. And like then it's like, how does that translate between games and stuff like that?
And if you kind of feel like you didn't get to do a whole lot with that character in one game or one setting or in one universe, you can use them again in a different one as well. And it might be a different kind of character, but you get to explore things in different ways, but with the same character that you like so much. Because making characters is great. Like it's great to make your own original character. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, and the last thing is water elemental, but we talked about a really cool encounter with just a single water elemental, so I think we can probably leave it with that one, because that's a really good idea. The one that you came across, Dan, underneath the water.
Yes, I think that's a gold star as far as I'm concerned. Gold star water fight. Steal that. Just steal it. Like, just do it. No one will know.
We won't tell.
It's like when you watch Bob Ross and he's like that's our little secret, and I love it when he says that. It's like, that's sweet because it's a TV show.
I hope you guys at home though are like, I got that idea from Creature Club, and I'm not just like, that's mine. It's mine.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
What was I going to say in terms of the fire elemental? Just to return to it very briefly, because we've already kind of said, hey, it's pretty cool as a monster, and it kind of needs the least work. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do any work, boys.
Yep.
Get your gloves and boots and goggles on.
Will do.
I think a fire elemental would be, like, as we said, the notion of like, it's in your house is on fire. That's great. I love that. And I think actually the idea of the fire elemental being like acknowledging the kind of primal fear of fire as part of the fight feels very natural to me. Like putting people in a house or like an inn, and like it starts setting on fire, and then they have to escape, and the fire elemental starts cutting them off. But I also just thought I would mention that like something like in a forest fire would be very cool, where, for example, like smoke and things like that can like reduce how far your party can see. And obviously maybe they can't breathe as easily. You could potentially have rules about how they have to make con saves or they start suffocating.
And I like
the idea that fire.
Sorry, I was going to real quick. I like the idea of just going with the actual idea of fire, where the bigger it gets, the stronger it becomes. So you kind of want to defeat it quick.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that it's like you're fighting it in this forest fire, and there's like these big, tall, proud trees all ablaze, and like if the fire elemental gets to them, it like eats the fire and like destroys the tree and gets more powerful. And so there's maybe like kind of a race element of like, do we hit the elemental now, or do we try to destroy what'll make it stronger in the next round? That kind of idea. I think that would be very cool.
Because fire is monstrous. Fire is quite all these elements are quite monstrous, but fire is definitely the most, so
like devastating.
So kind of going up with that,
and then for the water elemental, the only other thing I'll say is it would be very cool to be attacked by the water elemental. Again, that notion of using its native environment. Like obviously being attacked underwater is one thing, but like what about being attacked in like a sewer system or during a rainstorm or some other context where there's so much water around you that the water elemental has like a million places to escape. And so it's like constantly like, it's like, so unlike in water where it's actually invisible, it's almost more like hit and fade in the dark, right? Like you're in an alley and like there's heavy rain pouring down and like the gutters are streaming over, and like there's big like storm sewer drains under you, like gulping up as much water as they can. But like the city, it's been raining for days and the whole city's almost flooded, and then you get attacked and this elemental is able to get in and out everywhere, and like it's all about like positioning and watching where it's going to come from, and like a little bit of like kind of guessing it's going to come from one place and then it jumps you from another place. Do we want to talk any more about the combinatory elementals? Fusions.
Real quick, what fusion ones do we have?
So in the 4th edition book, we don't get any normal elementals. We get 4 fusions. We get the Fire Lasher, which is a combination of air and fire.
Okay.
It basically acts as both the fire and air elementals. It can squeeze through spaces. It's dangerous in close range. It has a really cool ability called Whirlwind Dash, where it can move really fast. It gets to move twice its speed, and anyone it moves through, like the fire form of the 5th edition fire elemental, gets set on fire afterwards, which I think is very cool. Kind of like the Flash, or like even like the DeLorean from Back to the Future, right? Like takes off very suddenly, leaves a stream of fire behind it. And then it has a wildfire cyclone, which is a big cone of fire that knocks everyone prone, which is kind of cool. I like the idea of sort of that combustion idea, that like it explodes a little. Like you said, Tim, the idea of like hyperoxygenation, right? Like condensed oxygen plus a little bit of fire creates a burst. So that's cool. I think you could probably, one of the things I think is interesting is that in some ways I would almost say for the combined elementals, just like overlay one on top of the other. So like for the fire elemental, the fire air elemental, just give it all the abilities of both. You know what I mean? Almost like just that it has everything from both of them and just does everything. Because I think that would be coolest if it was just like it can just do everything. As well as the Fire Lasher, we have the Rockfire Dreadnought, which is the fire and stone creature. It's actually weirdly enough, it's a little bit like the Earth Elemental in that it's actually not as interesting. It only has like 2 abilities, which are like Fist of Flame, which is just to punch somebody.
Yeah, Fist of Flame.
Which is pretty cool. It's it's appropriate Fist of Flame. It's kind of fun.
Tim came up with some excellent ideas though when we're starting out for like of like shooting hot coals at you, or even what I said about the heated body. So throw that in there for that guy, and that'll be right at home.
Yes. It says, and the other ability it has, interesting enough, Brimstone Rock. The Rockfire Dreadnought fires flaming chunks of brimstone at the target.
There we go.
So actually, there you go. That kind of idea of like it throws flaming bits of itself.
They stole my idea before I came up with it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can talk to Mike Morales about that because,
Mike!
Earth Wind Ravager. A mad combination of air and earth. Imagine, if you will, air and earth.
Dust.
I refuse. So the Earth Elemental, this is kind of like, it's kind of interesting. It looks like it's basically like a pile of rocks suspended by air, and it's kind of like more solid, but it's mostly wind still. It can only fly because it's sort of just stones suspended by nothing. It has this really interesting idea where it basically like it's called Wind Devil, which is actually a very cool ability name. So I want to mention that, where basically it picks somebody and they get surrounded by like stone and earth, and they can't move. They're like immobilized by like the strong winds, but also the stones, almost like they're kind of like coffin stones, like they're kind of trapped in place, and they're very slowly crushed unless they can successfully save against it, or someone else can intervene and help, which I think is kind of cool. Feels like the natural kind of conclusion of the two of them, that you're just kind of slowly being squeezed, which is nice.
That means you can get through a space smaller than 1 inch.
And then finally we have the Thunder Blast Cyclone.
I like that one.
Which is air and water. This is the one I mentioned last time, which is the sort of tornado with little evil red eyes on it, which I just...
with a bad face. With an evil face.
It just looks so stupid, man. Anyway, this thing is it's actually probably the most straightforward for the most part, because it's kind of just a lightning elemental in some ways. It just shoots lightning most of the time. And that's like most of what it does. It has one really cool ability that I actually really like, called Charged Mist, where basically it bursts, right? So a burst in Fori is like everyone around it. It basically explodes into mist, and everyone inside the mist is automatically hit by lightning damage, because the idea is that the mist is so charged with electrical particles that they take damage. And then it says it becomes insubstantial until the end of its next turn. So like it literally explodes, and it's so spread out that you can't land a hit on it, and the next turn it reforms. And I just think that's a very cool, like, what's happening ability. So I like that.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Does it have to reform in the same place that it exploded?
No, because it's just insubstantial, so it can move and then reform elsewhere.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yes, it's very cool. I really like that ability because it just feels very... because it's a recharge ability as well. It feels like it's one of those things where the monster does it once, and the party are like, "What was that?" Like properly angry at you for doing it to them. And then it's like it's okay. It's a recharge ability. He's not going to do that again. But it's still fun, and you get to threaten them by rolling the d6 every turn. Like, oh, does he recharge? And they all clench slightly every time you say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are actually overall some pretty cool monsters. I'm still very surprised that there isn't sort of, for lack of a better term, like standard elementals, right? Like each of the elements alone.
Yeah.
But but they have some fun abilities, and the artwork of them is kind of fun. They all look really evil though.
Scary. Well, they're trying to kill you, Dan.
Anyway,
excellent.
You've told me.
Cool. Well, that's great. So think about how you can use them in your game, guys. There's some proper fusion monsters there of what we just talked about. So let's end it there, guys. Let's call it there because we're at feature length right here. So
sweet Jesus.
So guys, thank you so much for listening to Creature Club Podcast. We have a Creature Club Podcast website where you can go on there and
yes.
It's like before we started recording, someone went, "Now, Mikey, we have a website. Do you know what that is?" And we went, "Yeah, guys, obviously I know what a website is."
It's a website club podcast.
Now I've been told by my producer that we have a website now. I don't know what that does. I don't know if it'll really catch on, but if that's your thing,
puts on his glasses to read the piece of paper.
Website. We can go to this website at and let me see here. HTTP. No. CreatureClubPodcast.com. You can go on there. There's a contact us form. Send us any questions, queries, any comments, any feedback on the podcast, or send on some homebrew monsters that we can take and use for a homebrew special. If you want to do that, if you give us permission to do so, or you want to send to us just so you want to show us your cool homebrews, for if you want to hear us talk about them. Or if you just want us to see them, I guess. Either way, whatever floats your boat. We're not always going to take them and put them in the show if you don't want to do it. And we have a Creature Club Twitter. Tell us about the Twitter, Tim.
It is at Creature Club Pod. Or you can just search Creature Club Podcast on Twitter, and we're usually the first ones up there. You see our little D20 wearing the little hat. And that's where we kind of interact most frequently. We post anytime a new episode comes up, and we post little bits here and there as well. And you'll catch Mikey, myself, and Dan in the comments occasionally if you have a question, or you will see Stephen Brady, our patron saint, memeing the shit out of us because
dragging us,
just putting us on blast,
absolutely,
because of our shite podcast.
Absolutely. But he only criticizes us because he loves us. He wants us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and we appreciate him.
We legally have to say
just
that
for memes. Yeah.
Love you, Stephen. And subscribe to us on whatever podcasting app you are using if you haven't already, and consider telling a friend who likes D&D and needs some ideas about us. And that seems like it's it, guys. Next time we shall talk.
One more thing. If after I said something similar last episode. If after our tangent about the Dunleary IMC Time Crisis 2 made you think, I don't think I can recommend this to a friend of mine, that's fine. But hey, what would be very cool is if you left a review somewhere, even if it's a 3-star review saying, "I like the podcast. I wish they wouldn't talk about Time Crisis so much." That's fair. That's a valid response. And
I was actually thinking about on the Twitter putting up a poll of like, tangents, yes or no? Like, it's not going to change. We're going to still get a tangent. But I was just like wondering. It's an anonymous poll. What do the people actually think?
Yeah,
and then,
that's fair. Just sort of go like,
you might see.
Yeah. Look, you can tell us.
I mean, if we lose the tangents, we lose 90% of the podcast, guys. We need the tangents.
Yeah, it would be very quick and not, it would be miserable as well.
It would be too concise. Yeah.
Hi guys, it's Mikey from the future here in the editing booth. I just want to let you know that yes, we did do a poll, and 94% of the people who voted want the tangents to stay in. So there you go. back to the show. Excellent. Yes. When I say tell a friend just about the show in general and have them pick a monster they like and start from there. But let's hope it's not elementals because that'll be a bad one to start with.
I think it'd be an excellent one to start
Very
with.
honest, at least. You'd certainly get the sense of us, you know.
Yeah, what we like
Full
to do.
effect.
Cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening, guys. Next episode will be about something else. I have been Mikey.
I have been Tim.
And I have been Dan.
And you better stay cool and stay safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands.
Oh, yeah. Great advice.
Good call.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast.